So then, good evening. So today, the subject is the fulfillment of all hopes by Kyabje Rinpoche. This is Kyabje Rinpoche's commentary to the 50 stanzas on Guru devotion by Ashwakosha. So I thought that because due to our time, then due to the shortage of time, then we cannot go through the whole text. We cannot go through the text in its entirety. So I thought the first day I could open, so to speak, go through the opening of the commentary, and then give some background of the theme, which is Guru devotion, and then in the second day, then perhaps go with some of the points, some of the verses from the 50 verses. We can go with some of. I would like to cover some of the verses, and then in the third day, then also we can continue with that, and then perhaps maybe I thought maybe the formal reading, the formal reading of I think the 50 verses is good. The 50 verses is good. So like this, and so first of all, I would like to open the commentary. And if you have the English translation, this is the Garrett Sparham translation. If you have this book, then it is on page 29. Homage to Guru Manju Kosha. Manjushri, although you are the father of all kings, you have the body of a young prince. While your gentle words give relief to those who wander, they likewise frighten the demons. Although you are always above all, your work as the servant of wanderers, may you always protect us with your most excellent deeds. To the extent of my ability, I am going to explain 50 stanzas on the Guru about the way to be devoted to a holy spiritual friend, Mitra, who, when served properly, is the one entrance that easily grants all the accumulations of goodness. Manjushri, referred here as the father of all kings, and kings here means the Buddhas, and Manjushri guides the Buddhas when they are on the Bodhisattva stage to Buddhahood. So this is the reference to that, I think. So like this. So then, as Kyabje Rinpoche had mentioned, that with Guru devotion, when one relies on the right person, on the right spiritual guide, then this, the guidance of that spiritual friend can, it then will be the entrance to Buddhahood, entrance to liberation. This is a very important point, especially where Kyabje Rinpoche emphasizes when one serves when one relates to the right person. That bit, that part that really captures much meaning. So I thought to give some background on that. Those of you who are well versed, who have been familiar with the Lamrim teachings and so forth. Of course, you need no introduction. You need no background information. But for those who are like me, a beginner, who are perhaps new to the concept of new to Buddha Dharma, and maybe have not much background on the concept of Guru devotion, then I thought I could share some thoughts. I could share some information. Okay, so Guru devotion, actually, when I was thinking about this term, Guru devotion, the Tibetan word is Shenye Densul. This is the Tibetan word, Shenye Densul. And interestingly, in the Tibetan word, we do not have the devotion part in the Tibetan word. In the Tibetan word, we say Shenye Densu, right? Shenyen means a spiritual guide, right? That is Shenyen. And Densul, Temba means, I think here, reliance. So Tsul is the way. So the way to rely on a spiritual guide. This is the meaning of Shinyen Dentsul. But someone had decided to take the shortcut and just simply label it Guru devotion, right? So this is just one thing. Okay, so Guru devotion, how it's about how the student, how the learner relates, how the learner approaches and relates to the teacher, to the spiritual friend, to the spiritual guide. Okay, and not to give many quotations, then this is considered very important because in the text it always mentions that all realizations, no matter how, whether minor or major, they have to come through the spiritual guide. The spiritual guide is like, it gives this example, something like, the spiritual guide is like a magnifying glass, and no matter how powerful the sun is, it cannot by its own burn a single blade of grass, you could say, but through the magnification, through the magnifying glass, that could burn, right? It could be burned. So similarly, we say the Buddha, I think speaking in the modern time, the historical Buddha at least is someone that is not accessible, but his blessings can be transmitted through our spiritual guide, and through our spiritual guides, then through our gurus, then we receive the blessings of the Buddhas, right? And these blessings then do away with our fears, with our problems, with our mental issues, with our afflictions, right? So they burn our three mental poisons. So this is one thing. And because Tibetan Buddhism has a very strong influence, has a very strong Vajrayana influence, then many people, when they think of Guru devotion, then they immediately think of Guru devotion in the Vajrayana context. They immediately think about Guru devotion specifically in the highest Yoga Tantra context, So this is a misconception, This is something that we have to be mindful, so that to not immediately always link Guru devotion itself directly to Guru devotions that is explained in Vajrayana, right? I think we should be aware of those distinctions. Okay, and now, and because Guru devotion in the context of the Dharma, generally speaking, need not necessarily refer to these higher levels of Guru devotion, if I may present it like that, then somehow it gives it gives us, the learners, the students on the path, more freedom, more liberty, more freedom, right? And how so? How does that give us more freedom? I think it is like this, that as many of you know, that Guru devotion in the highest Yoga Tantric level, then it is clear that one has to view the Guru as indivisible from Vajradhara, from Vajradhara, from the deity, from whatever deity is your main practice, right? One has to approach this practice with that basis, with that particular Guru devotion, with that way of approaching the Guru as the basis, right? So, generally speaking, Guru devotion need not, with Guru devotion, you don't have to think like that, So, you don't have to think of the Guru as Vajradhara, you don't have to. Even on the Lamrim level, it is not necessary, that is not necessary. And simply, we have to first, I think, rely on the spiritual guide and see the spiritual guide as part of the Sangha, we could say. And not even necessarily when I say Sangha in a strictly monastic sense. It can also be a non-monastic. That is very much possible, right? And this is also explained in the texts, that when we say a spiritual guide, a teacher, it is not. It's not necessary that the spiritual guide has to be a monastic. So the texts, they are very clear on that. It is not necessary. The spiritual guide can be a monastic as well as a non-monastic. So this is very clear in our reference texts. So then, how do you approach the spiritual guide? How do you approach a spiritual guide? So this is a very important part, right? Of course, this spiritual guide cannot be just anyone. It cannot be anyone based on how learned they are or how they are revered in the society and so forth. it is not to be judged by how famous they are or how fancy their titles are and so forth, right? It is not like that. But it's simply that the spiritual guide must be endowed with certain qualifications. This is important. So when one approaches when one is seeking a spiritual guru, a spiritual guide, a guru, for searching for your own guru, it is important that you have to set out the qualifications, the criteria of your prospective guru, right? This is very important. Because starting this relationship, the guru-disciple relationship, this isn't just, it isn't some trivial thing. One has to put much thought into starting this relationship, this relationship. And because of that, then one needs to really set out the qualifications straight, right? So the qualifications are clear. First of all, the spiritual guide must be a sound person, must be ethically sound, right? So, because if this person that you are going to start this, you're going to regard as the person as your guru, if this person does not meet the standards, the ethical standards, then you are putting your faith, you are putting your trust in the wrong person, And as you know, that the purpose of guru devotion, the purpose of having this relationship is for one's practice, is for developing one's practice, is for developing one's understanding of the Dharma, is for developing, is for being inspired to practice the Dharma. And if this person that you are trusting, that you're putting all your faith onto, is someone who is non-ethical, who could take advantage of you, then this would be counterproductive, With this kind of placing this much trust and faith in the wrong person will not benefit you. On the contrary, it will be counterproductive. It will be damaging. It would, I think, damage one's self-esteem, and in worst scenario, in worst cases, one is left traumatized, right? And even by way of being traumatized, then I think even there is a possibility that you could lose faith in the Dharma altogether, right? By placing, could I call this misguided devotion? Misplaced devotion? Yeah? So if we are not careful, then these are the consequences. These are the consequences. So we have to then really think about the number one thing, which is ethical standards. So we have, just as we need ethics in a secular setting, of course, in the Dharma, there's no question. Even our standards are more stringent. We have to up those standards of ethics. So therefore, we must be very careful in approaching a person and taking the person as your spiritual guide, So do not choose because the person is famous or the person is impressive. Do not choose for those reasons. It is not like we are going around shopping for like a car or flowers or something, When you choose a guru, it should not be based so much on those kind of features, In other words, we should not be worldly when deciding the spiritual guide. Our way, our reasonings for choosing something, it should not be worldly, Because if the way we choose a spiritual guru, if that is similar to how we would choose mundane objects in our everyday life, if we act on the same way, then this won't be fruitful. It won't do you any good, long term or short term. It won't do us any good if we think like this. If we give in to our worldly thoughts and then simply let them decide the criteria and let them decide the criteria for your spiritual guru, for the prospective spiritual guru, right? So then this will, if we resort to these delusional thoughts, samsaric thoughts, then if we use them as our guides in choosing the spiritual guru, then this won't, nothing good will come out of that. So that's that. And then I think having chosen a person as the spiritual guru, the spiritual guide, then again I feel that we have that really you, because you are the most important person here, right? You have liberty, you have freedom of choice. I think this is something that we should always keep in mind when we approach the Dharma, and especially when dealing with Guru devotion, right? To never forget that you have that freedom of choice, right? To never forget that. This is important. And when I say choice, I don't mean in a very general way, but you have that choice of how you are going to place that Lama in your heart, how you're going to view the person. So you have that choice of whether you want to view the spiritual guru as simply a spiritual friend, simply as a part of, as a wise person, an ethical wise person who is well versed and has attained a certain mastery of the practices and is a practitioner himself or herself. You can view your spiritual guide just like that, or you can view the spiritual guide and then maybe you can also have more reverence, have more respect, maybe higher respect. I think something like, in the three jewels. We have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? So you can put your spiritual guide on now I'm talking of a different level. On this level, then you can regard, you can see your spiritual guide as part of the Sangha, as in the three jewels. Not Buddha, not the Buddha, not even like a Buddha emanation, but merely as the Sangha, merely as the Sangha. So you can still have the spiritual guide you can put in one of the three jewels. By virtue of doing that, you're of course now taking refuge, right, in the spiritual guide. The first level, not really. We have not taken refuge in the spiritual guide, but we have respect and we admire the spiritual guide's own practice, and we are admired and inspired, and therefore we seek his or her guidance, right? With the other, then I think when we say taking refuge, then it is somewhat different, right? There is, I think now, more faith. It's more now faith-based, or at least the faith is stable. Now because with the first level, through the first approach, having acquainted oneself with this spiritual guide over the years, and we have to always give ourselves time. This is important, to not do things in a haste, right? To not do things in a hurry. We have to take time, and this is also, as we say, time will tell, right? In time, we will know, right? So we really, we have to give time and space, and gradually, if this person over time, over a long time, has stood, the test of time, has proven his or her value, worth, then I think one will naturally develop a heightened sense of trust, and this heightened sense of trust could be just faith, right? So we have different levels of trust. So like this. So then gradually, one has to, when you know that the person is ethically sound, then this is a good basis. You have a good basis. At least you are confident that this person will not take advantage, right? This is one thing. Now, simply, if the other person is just honest, that's simply, of course, simply being honest is not good enough to be a spiritual guide. One needs to sort of have the know-how. One needs to know, because without having the know-how, then how can one really practice the path, right? The path, one has to know the path, right? So then, of course, those things can come later, right? You can then check whether the person is qualified or not. You can do that later. But most importantly, it is honesty and ethics. Yeah, because if you place much trust in a very ethically sound person, but this ethically sound person may not really have much knowledge, at least you are safe. At least nothing can really go that bad, right? Right? At least you are. At least you will not be taken advantage of. Whereas if the person may seem to display much knowledge about the Dharma, but if the person is lacking the ethics, then it is really dangerous to rely on such a person as one's spiritual guide. And again, when I say seemingly, again, this is important because I feel if you really truly know the Dharma by heart, with the heart, then you cannot be non-ethical, right? So when we see this kind of person who displays much knowledge on the Dharma, when you come across a person who seems to be very knowledgeable, then I would really advise to not simply base your conceptions to base everything on that impression, that could prove to be dangerous, right? So we have to be very careful in choosing our spiritual guide, because if we are naive, if one is naive, then there are people out there, just for your information, they are looking for naive people, they are looking for naive people. So and these kind of things, then this is how scandals arise, because we have a group of people who do not really check the qualifications thoroughly, and who are too naive, or maybe they are somewhat romantic. Maybe they are romantics, and they have all these all these ideas, and then they project these ideas, these qualifications on the wrong person, sadly. And then when that happens, then these things can, things don't turn out so good, right? So we have to be careful. We have to be very careful. And regarding some of the scandals that we have come across and heard about, okay, you all know the stories of Telopa and Naropa, and then of course Marpa and Milarepa. What Naropa had to go through, what Milarepa had to go through, right? We know those stories, and they are explained in the context of Guru devotion. Those stories are told in the context of Guru devotion, and specifically here, what the story is telling us is that even if we are subjected to such insults, such beatings, such abuse by our own spiritual guru, we should follow through. We should not give in, right? We should be like Naropa and Milarepa. This is what the story, this is the message of those stories, right? This is one thing. If we are to enact what Telopa did to Naropa and what Marpa did to Milarepa in the modern day, I think this is going to be a big scandal. This is going to turn out to be a big scandal. If they're not going to, if just imagine, like, it is so good that Tilopa did what he had to do to Naropa in those times. Just imagine if Tilopa was born here in the modern day Singapore, and he subjected Naropa to those abuses, and if someone found out, and nowadays with smartphones, you never know, this could go viral, and who knows where Tilopa might end, right? So it is, we really have to think about these issues carefully, that because if the teacher is like Tilopa, and if the student is like Naropa, and then the teacher can do anything to the student, and it can only get better, right? But if the teacher is like me, and the student is like you, but not you, but you, and if I do to you what Tilopa did to Naropa, then I'm in trouble, I'm going to end up behind bars, right? So these teachings, they are really wonderful and very inspiring. I find just those small little things that I said before. This is just to let you know, this is in no way belittling any historical figure. No way, right? But that was the point. The point that I wanted to get across was that level of guru devotion in the face of such abuse in today's world, is that possible? Do you think that it would be possible? And do you think that the student would actually become enlightened? So I think so this is why, and remember how I was saying, the number one qualification for the spiritual guru is ethics. You could argue, well, when Naropa first saw Tilopa fishing, right? And he was killing lots of fishes, I think that was the story, right? You could say, that's not ethical, right? The act of killing is not ethical. So did Naropa rely on the wrong person, right? You could always ask that question. And this is where for that, I think the answer lies somewhere. Well, the answer is within Vajrayana. This is Vajrayana level. The Naropa Tilopa story, the life story of those, the teachings of those great beings, this is not within the conventional world, This is very high level of practice. And this is why I think, the highest yoga tantra is called secret tantra. Because most people, they do not have the mental disposition, they do not have the stomach for the practice and for the consequences, right? Most people, they cannot tolerate. They cannot tolerate that level of practice, right? And this is why it was secret, I think. This is one of the secret elements. So for those of us who are on the beginner level, then we don't, it is irrelevant to put ourselves in the position of Naropa or Milarepa. It is we don't. It is irrelevant, right? And right now we have to rely on a spiritual guide. We have to rely on a spiritual guide whose level of practice or whose behavior seems appropriate for us. Yeah, this is important. So this is why I think ethics is such a good standard, because when you have with the ethics, this can be accepted by Buddhists, non-Buddhists alike. Just as His Holiness gives teachings in his teachings, talks about the universal ethics. So these ethics is something that we should bring in, not only for our own practice, but also when looking for our spiritual guide, to make sure that this spiritual guide also has those ethical standards, that abides by those same ethical standards. This is one thing. And then again, even when we do, I feel, let's say, Vajrayana, we do many rituals, right? We do many rituals, many Vajrayana rituals, Kriya Tantra, and also highest yoga Tantra rituals. Then again, we have to ask ourselves, how did we get into Tantra? How did we get into highest yoga Tantra, right? How did we enter this? I think we have to think. And then these days, when we have big events, we have so many people, and so many people, much of these people, they may not have had the time to really analyze the person, right? Analyze the person who is going to give the initiation, so forth. So if you are one of those persons, then if you happen to attend one of these events, does that mean that you have to take on that person who was on the throne as your spiritual guide? Personally, I don't think one has to take on the person as one spiritual guide. It is not necessary. But somehow, I think some people, they feel just merely being at the event, then you are somehow obliged to take on the person as your guru. I don't think that is the case. I don't think so. Because this is too fast, Before taking on the spiritual guru, I think the best thing is to first to get to know the person. Yeah? This is important, to get to know the person, and then gradually take some what we call common teachings, sutraic teachings, some very basic teachings. To begin like this, I think is the best way. is the safe way, at least. It is the safest path. So, by some chances, due to some circumstances, if you have to attend such event, then don't feel obliged because you are in that group, that you have to begin, that you have to regard the person as your guru. Don't feel obliged. It is perfectly okay to be at that event without looking at the person as your guru. One way I have some confidence in having this opinion is, I think it was in a few years back when His Holiness was giving the initiation, Genrasic initiation. This is the Wangchen, not just any permission blessing, but the initiation, the full initiation of Avalokiteshvara, 1000-armed Avalokiteshvara in Milano. At that time, there were, I think, also it was a big gathering. So, of course, His Holiness, due to his compassion, then he made it very clear, to the audience that due to at some specific parts, His Holiness would say, this is how it is said in the text, but for those of you who are not necessarily practicing Buddhism, then you can maybe think like this, and then His Holiness would modify, some of the visualizations, and these visualizations, of course, is acceptable even for non-Buddhists, right? So because His Holiness gives us this freedom, then when we attend any event where due to shortage of time we cannot really learn more about the Lama, but somehow we feel that it is necessary to attend this event, then you can simply do some visualizations that you find helpful, and have some some respect for the person from a distance. That is good enough. That is good enough. There is no need to see the person, view the person as your guru. So please don't feel obliged if you find yourself in such events. So definitely, then when we say Guru devotion, we do not have to view our Guru as the Buddha. It is absolutely not necessary that we have to, even after establishing some kind of relationship, and you feel good about this person, and have taken a few Dharma discourses from the person, again, it is not necessary that you have to take on the person as the embodiment of the Buddha. That is absolutely not necessary. Why am I saying this? It is because because this is a very serious matter. Looking at someone as the Buddha, this is for Buddhists, I think this is the biggest thing. For a Buddhist, this is the ultimate goal, right? I mean, Buddhahood. This is the end. This is the end. So, to give this status, Buddhahood, to someone, in your eyes, this is a serious matter. So, you really have to think thoroughly. These days, I think in the Commonwealth, they give something like this kind of knighthood, right? Even for that, you need so many qualifications. Imagine if you are going to give Buddhahood status to someone, just this is 1 million times higher than knighthood, So you really have to take this seriously, right? You have to take this very seriously. So this is one thing, in light of the things that we hear now and then in popular media. So I feel, and maybe one thing why we have all these kind of situations is that because perhaps I think people are not given that freedom of choice. They are not given that liberty. They are not instructed to take this very seriously. They are not instructed to really analyze the person, to really check on that person, to review the person. They are not advised. They are not encouraged. Instead, they are encouraged to take on a spiritual guide in one day. Now you have to come now, and you have to see this person. You have to receive this initiation from this person. Such and such person is in town. Come get the initiation. This is so precious, right? And then you are sucked into that. And then after this initiation, then someone tells you, oh, now this person is your guru. And then you are like, oh, really? Okay, right? Yeah. So I think sometimes it happens. It happens. This happens. I think, especially among us, to us, where we have a very strong background, that where we have a Buddhist background. This can, I think, easily happen, especially, like this. So then, if we end up like this, like the situation I described, then this is really a case of really being ill-informed. So we must be informed. This is important. And now with technology, information is in the palm of your hand, just like Lamrim Namdeo Lagjang. So information is in the palm of your hand. So now we must really make use of that, make use of that. Of course, having faith, I'm not saying we should now, up till now, we have been very faithful. Now we have to change because this is the 21st century. Now we must really think and divorce from faith. No, this is not my message. I am not saying that, not at all. We should have faith, but our faith should be backed up by wisdom, by reasoning, right? By reasoning, by analysis. This is so important, and this is something that His Holiness has really been encouraging us all these years. All these years, His Holiness always talks in his discourses about the two approach. Reason, one is the reason-based approach, and then the faith-based approach. And it seems something like what we have, the presentation of the path in the Lamrim text, they seem to be more faith-based, right? And His Holiness talks about, gives that quotation from Abhisamaya Alamkara, which presents the 10 subjects, I think, of the special instructions, something like that. That presentation is more faith-based, So His Holiness always reminds us of these two approaches and then encourages us to take the reasoning-based approach, reasons-based approach. So, because if we use reasoning as our reference point, then we have what's the word? If we are too faith-based, if we rely too much on faith, then blind faith, having faith naively, then there's a danger that we could really harm ourselves. That we could bring harm to us, right? Whereas with a reason-based approach, then that won't happen, right? With a reason-based approach, then because we understand the reality, therefore we won't be subjected to these kind of abuses. Because with wisdom, then we won't bring ourselves in those situations, right? So I think then we should tread like this. We should approach the Dharma like this, and then approach the spiritual guide in this manner. Okay, so at this point, then maybe we can. I will stop talking for now, and you can perhaps, if there is something that you would like to share, if you have an opinion, if there is something that concerns you, please feel free to share. Feel free to be open. And so shall we start?
Okay, so CJ.
Thank you, Rinpoche, for your teaching. So my question has two parts. One part is on, given the gurus that we have to choose carefully, right? Some people that I met with actually prefer to have many gurus so they can learn different things from different gurus. Whereas some other people, they prefer to have one or two, stick to a few gurus. So how do we know what kind of ourselves, whether we need to have more gurus or just stick to a few? Because I know like people like masters like Lama Atisha, he has hundreds of gurus, whereas other masters only have one or two. So how do we know ourselves, which type of person we are? And second part is, when we choose a guru, you mentioned that we need to choose someone who is knowledgeable. But then in certain cases where a person is already, he picked a particular guru for particular teaching, is that possible? For example, Lama Atisha, he was perhaps I think he was a Prasangita, but his teacher Lama Selimpa, he's a Chitta Mantra. So philosophically they're different. But Lama Atisha still faithfully go learn from Lama Selimpa because of the Bodhicitta practice. So should we likewise, do something like that? Yeah.
Thank you.
you.
So regarding the first question, then yes. Again, you as the learner, we as students, we have the choice. We can make the choice, But before that, then we have to ask ourselves, what is the point of having a teacher? This is, I think, very important. What is the point of having a teacher? Sometimes I feel that there's really no point in having two teachers when you can have one good teacher. You can have one good teacher, right? One good guru. Why not? But then everyone has their reasons, don't they? Right? Everyone has their reasons. They are in different situations, they come from different places, and there might be, and of course, if you look at, especially now here, I think we are talking about Tibetan Buddhism. I believe that there are other traditions of Buddhism where if you, for example, if you walk into the temple, you don't see any tangas. You don't see like 100 different statues. You don't see that, right? Maybe you just see one statue, right? And if you receive a teaching, it is a very short, concise teaching, right? With Tibetan Buddhism, if you walk into the Lakang, you see not one stupa, not one statue, but maybe 10 or 20 different statues. And then you see all these tangas, right? You see all these tangas. So, it seems like in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, because we have so many deities and we have so many different sadhanas, therefore it would be quite difficult to receive all these blessings, all these initiations, all these commentaries from a single source, because the Lama could become quite tired, don't you think? If the Lama had to give hundreds of initiations in a few days, that might be asking too much from the Lama, So like that, I think this is why we have a multitude of lamas, right? Because we have different practices, and each practice has within it contains a different approach, a different emphasis. So for those reasons, then I think this is why we need different lamas. Not only so that it makes the job of disseminating the tradition easier from the viewpoint of the Lama, but also because we have so many different deities and different practices, then we have lamas we have gurus who specialize, those respective deities, right? Those respective traditions and so forth. So this is why we have to receive the teachings from different lamas, because one lama might not specialize in that practice, right? So this is the reason why. Now, why is there the need for so many different teachings? Isn't one enough? Isn't one deity enough? And couldn't one reach enlightenment by simply relying on only one practice, on only one deity, relying on only one spiritual guru? Is that not possible? Of course that is possible, right? So it is your choice. What do you find more beneficial? Would you like to devote all your time to one practice, to one sadhana practice of a particular deity for your whole life? Or would you like to do different things at different moments for different situations? So you have to make that decision, and based on those decisions, then you can make that choice, you know. With the second question, I think I lost the second question in all the practices and deities in all the tangas. I lost your question. What was the second question?
Thank you, Rinpoche. The second question was in regard, it's also related to the first, where we take a particular teacher for a particular teaching. In some case, for example, Lama Atisha, I mean, of course, we are not Lama Atisha, but just an illustration.
Yes, now I remember.
Okay.
This is about the knowledge part.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So, because now we have, this is Vajrayana Buddhism, so we can, yes, on the one hand, we have that issue of Atisha being a following the Prasangika view, school of thought, and Lama Selingpa following the Chittamattrin view. But then, is this real? Right? You could always ask that question. And in reality, Lama Selingpa, I think, is Buddha. Is an enlightened being. So there is no question. There is no question of whether this person has the right level of knowledge or not. It is only for, there's a Tibetan word, but something like only for, to the conventional world, that we see these two masters in different ways, or one is in the, we say in the Prasangika system, the other is from the Chittamattrin system, right? So this is how I see it, that in reality, I don't, personally speaking, because, the great Atisha devoted so many years in relying on Lama Selingpa, and had received the instructions, the practice of bodhicitta from him, then for me, in my eyes, Lama Selingpa is an enlightened being, Perhaps one being Chittamattrin and the other being Prasangika. Even that, within that, I think it also, there is a teaching, there is a message within those appearances. And the message that I get is that it doesn't matter where your guru seems to display a view that may not accord with ultimate reality, as so long as that guru has bodhicitta, then you can take on the person as your spiritual guide. So this is the message, this is what I understand from those stories. Thank you.
Rinpoche, can I
Yes,
ask a
please.
question? A lot of us have Lama that passed away, for example, like Lati Rinpoche, and then when we go and visit the next reincarnation of Lati Rinpoche, there's a difficulty. For example, like we might have a lot of faith in the previous, like Lati Rinpoche, but when we look at the next reincarnation, due to our own, limited mind, it's very difficult to develop the same kind of faith. And then, given my age, by then, Lati Rinpoche next reincarnation will be able to teach. I think I passed away already. So how do we then benefit from his, our Guru's next reincarnation?
Oh, what was the last part?
How do we benefit from our Guru's next reincarnation when they are still child?
So, this question is very interesting. Okay, so we can think like this. When our spiritual guides, when our gurus, when they manifest, taking the death process and then taking rebirth, when they manifest taking rebirth, how do we see, how should we view the Yangtze, the reincarnated tulku of our spiritual guide, right? For me, it's, I know it's simple that we simply have to look at the Yangtze as the spiritual guide, as our Lama, right? Now, if you say to someone, well, I received this teaching from the incomparable master, from Lati Rinpoche, from Kyabje Lati Rinpoche. If you say this, what is the image? When you say Lati Rinpoche, of course the image, the previous Lati Rinpoche will come up. Not the Yangtze, right? Yeah, not the Yangtze. This is true, right? And then when doing Guru yoga, then the image of the person who you have taken, who you have established the Dharma relationship comes up. Yeah? So then, as we say, the tulkus are really emanations. Emanations. So it's something like the Sambhoga Kaya, Nirmana Kaya. Then I think, and what do we even mean by Lama, by Guru? Maybe at this point I can perhaps talk about this. Taya Rinpoche, Taya Jang Rinpoche, I think, was it this year or last year? Then Rinpoche talked about, conventional guru and ultimate guru, right? So this, Rinpoche said, ultimately, then we have to look at the ultimate guru, right? Because when we see, and now I'm talking about Vajrayana, highest Yoga Tantra level, so I have to go back there, right? So what I find useful, helpful, is not to look at not to just stop with viewing our lamas in that human form and just stopping there. If you just only stop there, this is, I think, sometimes where problems could arise, especially attachment, those things can arise. So we have to really think about the ultimate guru. In the True Truth body, we have the, what we call, it's Dharmakaya, right? Dharmakaya and Rupakaya. So the Lama, our guru, in a human form, is Rupakaya. And then the ultimate guru, I think, is Dharmakaya. I think. But this is something that I would like to talk, because I myself am not so sure, because Thayar Rinpoche at that time, at the teaching, did not clarify what Rinpoche meant, what ultimate guru exactly refers to, right? But in our sadhanas, when we invite the beings, we invite them from Dharmakaya, right? The Rupakaya arises from Dharmakaya. So I'm thinking maybe there is a correlation, maybe it's parallel, that parallel, the ultimate guru and conventional guru parallels with Dharmakaya and Rupakaya. This is what I hope for, but I could be wrong, right? So in the future, we can talk more about this. So, thank you. And then,
Thank you, Rinpoche, for sharing your wisdom. I have a question regarding tonight's teachings, where you emphasize a lot on checking the gurus in a way where the quality of ethics is very important. So I start thinking about, so how do we check that he is ethical? And if I relate it to the 10 non-virtuous actions, where we have the 3 body, 4 speech, and 3 mind, the body and the speech we can sort of study or see from the behavior and speech. But for the mind, I think it's very difficult, to know exactly what the teacher real intention or motivation when he do something or say something, because it's in his mind, so we can't read the mind. So that's one thing I want to know, how to check, in such a way that we know for sure this person is really with a pure heart, open-hearted. And then the other thing is, in relation to this question, it's also about ethics, because I'm interested in the practical side, is that we are quite far away from checking any teachers, We base a lot on publicity, from brochures, because we're not near, We're not near to the teachers. And especially, it's true that we shouldn't rely on the status, on the reputation, but it is those big lamas that have more publicity posters, The quieter ones, they don't have. So very hard to know, unless we are attending to the Lama, then we can really see, sometimes I wish, that we can be the one attending. And that's what Atisha did, right? He spent lots of time with Salimpa to check on him. But there's no way we can do that. And so in essence, I felt, in reality, a lot of us are based our judgment on faith, very much on faith, even though we know we have to base on reason. So partly we don't have the time, partly we don't have the condition to be near the Lama to understand exactly how he behaved. In fact, I would say a lot based on our good karma and luck, because I have very good teachers who have already passed away, and I didn't really so-called check on them, but I do have faith, and my faith happens to be, I happen to be lucky because my teachers are very good. Yeah. So, and the other thing I rely on is the centers. We trust the centers to do their checking. If the centers can bring in good teachers and we trust the center, that's the other way of going to the right centers. That's how I approach finding teachers. Yeah, but maybe Rinpoche can add on more because I think this would be very good advice for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yes. Yeah. These are very important issues. You're right. You're absolutely right. You're totally right in your statements. Okay, so we have to, I think, use time, not directly regard the person as your spiritual guru. I don't mean to say you can definitely attend events, but that doesn't mean you have to take on the person as your spiritual guru, right? You can do that after you develop conviction in the person, in the person's ethics, in the person's motivations. And how can one develop conviction in a person? This is a very good question. Okay, so developing and knowing for sure that this person has absolutely no bad intentions, has no attachment, has no ignorance, is an enlightened being. First of all, if one is not enlightened, how can one know that the other person is truly enlightened, right? So, knowing like that, I think only a few people can claim to know someone on that level, right? Now, we have to work with what we have. We have to use our resources. And what do I mean by that? Is that we have to, okay, the person acts very nice, physically, verbally, this Lama is seemingly nice looking, right? It's very nice, that's good, okay? But that is not enough, you're right. So, how do we make sure that this person is ethically sound, that this person not only talks the talk, but walks the talk, right? How do we make sure of that? Well, I think through investigation, through, what's the word? Word of mouth, right? So we have to really ask people around, yeah? In other words, we have to tune in to the gossip channels, you know? It's like these days when we go online shopping and you see there are 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, all of that, right? The brochures are like the 5-star reviews. These brochures that you mentioned, they are like the 5-star reviews, okay? And if you only look at the 5-star reviews, then all products are the best. They are always good, right? So what we must do is to look at the 1-star reviews and count how many of them and how seriously, are those true or not? Try to verify. So this is something that we can learn from online shopping and then apply it to checking on our gurus. Maybe through that, I think we can, it's realistic that way, I think, It's doable, right? It's reasonable. It's a reasonable way of investigating an object, right? Yeah, sometimes I think lamas are like products, So then, if lamas are products, then you are the buyer, and it's your responsibility, because sometimes, if you're at a good vendor, they give you all money back, but at some vendors they don't do that, right? So you have to really check the 1-star reviews and take them seriously. So we have to keep our ears open and see what we hear. We have to ask around, and we have to preferably from those in. Also look at the circles. What kind of people are there in the Lama circles? That can tell you a lot, right? So we have to really bring, wisdom, aka common sense, right? To do that. And this is why I was really emphasizing that we have that freedom of choice, that we are free to do, that we are free to use any techniques, even those things that we learn from online shopping, and then we can try to apply them in reviewing, in finding out the right Lama, So we have to be creative, So I think we can definitely use creativity here, and we don't have to be sort of bounded, by the Dharma, by social conventions, and follow these set of rules. We don't need to do that. That we are. It's really our responsibility, and because that is our responsibility, therefore we are at liberty in choosing any kind of way of assessing the person, So with that, I think I will stop. So thank you.